Death Row with Death Row closed caption, and it's that time again. Time for another review from yours truly, Death Row. Now, before we get started, please like, subscribe, and share, and hit that notification bell if you want to see more stuff that I put out there and some of the reviews that I've been putting out there. And today's movie is 1973, The Crazies by George A. Romero. In my opinion, one of the weirdest and craziest movies that you'll ever watch. Even the remake they tried doing later in the 2000s doesn't come close to this original 1973 movie, in my opinion. Now, before we get started, I'll go ahead and tell you this is The Crazies 1973, starring Lane Carroll, Will McMillan, Harold Wayne Jones as Clank. Will McMillan is David. He's the main character that is trying to save Judy, which is Lane Carroll's character, his fiance with the that is pregnant. Lloyd Haller plays Colonel Peckham, which is the main guy who has to take over the whole operation of the military is going about doing wrong. Lynn Lowry plays Kathy. Richard Liberty plays Artie, which you'll know who Artie is by looking at his face. This is 1973, so it was like 12 years before Day of the Dead, and Artie becomes Dr. Frankenstein, as Colonel Rhodes would put it. And we got Richard France as Dr. Watts. If you don't know who Richard France is as Dr. Watts, he's the guy that wore the eye patch on the TV station in Dawn of the Dead, which came later in 1978. Harry Spillman as Major Ryder, Will Disney as Dr. Brookmeyer, and so on and so on. Those are just some of the main characters I wanted to go over with you before we get started on this review. So, shall we get started? Here we go. The main storyline of this is basically a biological weapon has been accidentally, or say a biological virus has been accidentally released. And it starts off with this little family right here and them drinking the water, as you can see here. And something's going on here. Oh, let me go back a little bit. The father has gone crazy and has lit the house on fire pretty much, as you can see here. And that's where you see the entry of the movie. And then we go a little bit further on, and then you see the he's one of the he's a coach at the this is your main character. Let's see, what's his name again? I keep getting names. David. This is David and Judy right here. He's like a coach slash ex Green Beret slash volunteer firefighter, which is why he's woken up and being called in at this very time. All right, and they get there now, and Judy is a nurse, and she gets there to where the kids are, and the girl has already passed away and everything from whatever it is that she's caught, and yeah, it's kind of sad that just like right away you already have one kid dying from this weird virus, or they're calling Trixie virus in this show, in this movie, and the boy they think stands a chance because he didn't. I think he never drank that water, which they tell you later on in the movie. You know, the water is basically what is spreading it the most. And you see, they start putting up these UV lights in this little hospital area, and they basically say, like, as long as you're within these UV lights or ultraviolet lights or whatever, the virus can't spread in that area, so you don't have to wear the mask and all this other stuff. So apparently, the ultraviolet light kills it on as soon as it's airborne or whatever, so it can't pass to anyone else. At least that's how this movie plays it. And you enter. This guy from the army is the first one in charge, and he doesn't know much about what's going on, other than it wasn't supposed to happen, basically. And what was so bad is the town mayor, sheriff, and the doctor, just Dr. Brookmeyer, they all knew about what was going on in the town and what they were experimenting with and what they were disposing of or whatever. And all of them were like, "You told us this was not supposed to happen." And see, this army dude right here that is supposedly in charge, he was told something different than what the higher ups were told. He was told it was a latent virus, meaning it was nothing to it, like nothing could happen with it. And then finally when the uh, yeah, this is Major Ryder right here that's walking in. He's the one that's first in charge. And then Colonel Peckham comes in later and he tells them like, "No, that's just what we told you. What it really is, it's a virus that we can't seem to come up with a cure for, and is going to be used as a biological weapon. And we were just transferring it from one place to another. And this plane was not supposed to crash, and so forth." I mean, it's all kinds of crazy stuff. And then the townsfolk starting to see all these military folks showing up and start trying to close the place, close their whole town down. And what it is Colonel Peckham has pretty much said, "Hey, I want you to this perimeter around this entire county. I want it set up so nobody enters, nobody leaves. The only people entering are military or scientists, you know." And the communication problem in this thing is so straight up government type. It's like, first thing they do in this whole thing is they set up this stupid verification thing of your voice over the phone so they know it's really you they're talking to, as if there's going to be spies in the middle of a damn accidental virus outbreak. Now, granted, this is not that you didn't have computers in 1973. You didn't have cell phones. You didn't have internet. You didn't have any of that stuff. And so they're using this weird verification system by voice, and it just does not work whatsoever. I mean, it is probably the worst thing I've ever seen. But it really makes the town feel even more closed off if you think about it. It's like I said, there's no internet, no cell phones. Basically, the only way to get communication outside the town is through a regular landline phone, because this is 1973. And there really isn't any other way unless you do it by radio, transmission or something like that, or a CB, whatever. There's really no way of getting a communication outside of town. And then so all these army folks are dressed up in these white suits with the black gas mask on, going around rounding up all the town folk, all the country folk, and they all want to put them all together at the high school for some odd reason. And they think this is just a great idea. And honestly, what they should have done, which they didn't do, was just set up perimeters and not let anybody leave and say, just go back home. You know what I mean? But instead, they just felt like they had to round up every single person and take them into the town square. I mean, not to the town square, but to the high school for the town. And of course, he he's happy that Colonel Peckham shows up, because then he can just like let him have everything. And she's talking with the doctor that she's the nurse for, and the doctor's like, which is Dr. Brookmeyer, he's like, he gives her a antibiotic shot that's supposed to somehow slow down the virus, but it can still get you. And he basically tells her, like, hey, take a couple of these syringes and a vial of um, the stuff and get out of here, because you're pregnant and you don't need to be around this stuff. So she tries to get away, and that's when they meet. He meets. This doesn't work out. He basically tells everybody to give up their guns, which is like, you really thought that was a great idea. So he even tells the sheriff, "Give up your guns. We're taking control here, complete control. This is martial law. You don't have any control." Uh, and so yeah, but then the people start to turn on the soldiers because they can't get any information out of them. They're just telling them what to do, invading their houses pretty much, and grabbing them and putting them in vans and taking them to the the, the high school. Enter the doctor, which this guy is extremely pissed off when he shows up. Richard Francis' character, Dr. Watts, because he's like, look, I have my equipment back in my lab. If you had just sent me samples to my lab instead of bringing me here, I could have found this. I could have done a better job with my equipment than trying to bring all the equipment here and then me having to start all over again. And he's like, this makes no sense. This is like the worst operation I've ever seen in my life. And y'all brought me here for no reason whatsoever. Because you got me here so quick that I'm basically waiting on equipment to catch up with me. Whereas if you just left me alone where I was and I had the equipment already there, I could have started on something already. But now my hands are tied because I'm sitting here waiting on you guys. And that's where you enter Kathy and Artie, and this is Clank, who's the one with the blue jacket and the gun. They had gotten away from, for a little while, they got away from the people in the army dudes in the white, and they're hiding out in a different house. Let's see. Of course, he's giving them more heck about the whole operation being crap, and they're fixing to leave this little bitty house that they've been holed up in. Now, some of the people the virus actually starts to affect, and they start going crazy, like they predicted they would. But then the army folks don't know the difference between a crazy person and a person just defending themselves at this point. So it's mass hysteria on top of people actually going crazy. So the whole thing is a huge giant cluster, you know what. And so the army folks, they just decide, hey, we're just going to have to shoot these folks if they shoot at us or, whatever. Even though we don't know if they're crazy or not, we're just suspecting they are because they're shooting at us, even though they could just be defending their territory, their house, or whatever, because they don't know who this is. They're not even in army fatigues of any sort, or no identification whatsoever. They just show up in white suits and a gas mask. They could be anybody. And so they escape into the woods again because they're trying to get away. Yeah, and they're showing you they're using the gymnasium just to put these people. They're not really set up at the gymnasium for them to sleep on cots or anything like that. They're just there walking around. And so they're still, yeah, you can see the chaos going on in there. And see the actual doctor, after the equipment got there and everything else, and he got a blood sample that he thought would work. He thought he had a blood sample that showed immunity to the virus. He was trying to get out of there and get somewhere where he could show it to somebody and get and get an antidote made. And then what happens is, hold on, let's go back here. I want to show you this guy here. So yeah, they raid this house. And at this point, he realizes Clank is starting to go crazy too. Because he's trying to question these army dudes and get some information out of them. And Clank comes in behind them and just starts shooting everybody. Yeah. So he's like losing his grip. He's fighting it, but he's losing his grip. As you can see, this dude here, this older gentleman sitting right next to the younger girl. That's Dr. Frankenstein from Day of the Dead. He's a lot younger, 12 years younger in this movie, so it looks a lot different. moving on anyway. So yeah, they're in this little house after they kill those 3 soldiers, and trying to figure out what the next move is because they're trying to escape the town pretty much at this point. David, Judy, Clank, and Kathy and Artie. Kathy has already been going crazy. Clank is starting to go crazy, and Artie is right behind Clank and going crazy. So they've all 3 of them have come down with are in a different stage of the virus taking over their system. So uh, Judy has not yet shown symptoms, but she did take the shot. David, on the other hand, has shown no symptoms whatsoever, even though he's been exposed to it as long, if not longer, than most of. So you start to get an idea that maybe David is completely immune. So you think they would, of course, they're just sitting there talking and they're going nuts. Uh, yeah, and then of course the people back in the high ranking officials back somewhere nowhere near where the action's going on, they're talking about dropping a bomb on the place in case they can't control it and can't get it contained. Because old dude right here, he starts to grope up all over his daughter or whatever because he thinks it's his wife, and he's gone insane pretty much. He doesn't know what's real and what's not real anymore. And then old dude, he breaks it up, kicks the crap out of him, and then of course he's back and he's like trying to. He keeps tightening and tightening the grip on this community, not realizing he's just making things worse and worse as he goes along. Um, he's like, you know, at this point in time, I think he's telling them, "Hey, just one." They get one warning shot, and then they get shot, or whatever. By this time, that's too late. That's too late. They've already been shooting them. This whole thing with, yeah. So yeah, there was, they decide they gotta leave the house. She's out there in the middle of the sheep, playing around with the sheep, just, you know, and then yeah, they find him. Artie ends up hanging himself in the closet, and Clank is like, "I didn't do this. You gotta believe me, I didn't do this." And I'm pretty sure he didn't do it, but Artie was losing his mind, and I think he wanted to take himself out before he caused any more harm. And Clank is fighting it the whole time, and then you see Kathy out here in the middle of a field with sheep playing around, and all these soldiers, like 10 of these soldiers, show up, and they basically all have the guns pointed at this unarmed girl, and they don't want her near them, and they all end up just shooting her because they don't know what to do with her. She's acting completely insane by this time, so. And then he realizes he's got the bug. At least he still holds on to enough of his sanity to realize that he does have the bug. And he tells David and Judy, after fighting with David actually and losing his temper and doing all this stuff, he finally realizes, okay, I can't control myself anymore. You two guys go on, I'll stay back and shoot these army folks and let you guys escape. And that's kind of what he does. So he hunkers down in a spot and just starts picking them off. And it works for a little while. Alright, here's the part that I was talking about earlier. I almost got too far ahead of myself. So he finds a blood sample that is immune to the virus. He has her look at it to verify. She verifies, yes, it's bigger in this one, it's smaller in this one. So he's come up with a plan, basically. He's got it. But then he takes those 2 vials and is trying to get to the Colonel Peckham to tell him, like, look, this would work. But as he goes out there to do that, they stop him and decide they don't even recognize him for some odd reason. It's just because I guess they're on rotation, and for some reason the doctor's telling him, "Look, I'm working on the virus. You got to let me through. I've got good information here that we can stop this thing." Instead, these soldiers throw him in there in the gymnasium with the other population, not realizing they just threw their only opportunity to stop this thing away. I mean, it's a giant shit show. And then of course David, it's nighttime now, and he realizes that Judy is starting to succumb to a little bit of the virus, and she's starting to talk a little bit crazy, and she's asking David, hey, what do you want to name the baby, and all this stuff, just like talking like goo goo gaga type stuff. David's realizing, I was like, I probably am immune, because at this point, even with her taking that antibiotic that slowed it down, he still has not felt the effects of the virus whatsoever. So he's pretty sure at this point that he's probably immune after seeing her starting to succumb to it a little bit. So he puts her behind a bunch of bricks or whatever and tries to get one of these army dudes to in an enclosed area so he can attack them and take their suit and maybe act like one of them and get her out of there, basically. Because at this point, he thinks he really is. I mean, he is immune. I think he is too. So he thinks if he can just get her out of there and get her away from this situation by sneaking her out of there and acting like one of the army dudes, then maybe he can save her outside this area. Because this whole operation is, like I said, is a shit show and nothing is working according to plan. And at this moment, the whole town's going to die. Except for the ones that end up being immune, which is him. He's going to basically end up in that gymnasium standing around a bunch of dead bodies by himself. So he gets one of the suits, and then he realizes a bunch of crazies start coming up on him, and he has to shoot them because they're shooting at him thinking he's a soldier. So he shoots a couple of the crazies, and one of them ends up being a student, and he finally stops shooting, and the student recognizes him and says, "Coach, is that you?" And then sits down and starts like kind of wandering around, like, what did I do? So and of course the army dudes, another set of army dudes, show up and shoot her. And that's the end of her, his fiance, and his never to be born baby now. And of course, now they're talking about it. Now we don't want to hit the panic button. You know, they're starting to see reports of symptoms elsewhere, so there's no point in that whole quarantine zone anymore. And he realizes it was all for nothing, basically. So, state police had blocked the roads to keep anybody from going in and out. So that was the whole point of that. And this doctor is like, if only we knew what Dr. Watts was working on. Yeah, because you dumbasses treated him like a civilian. And the thing what happened, and I didn't show you in this clip because I'm trying to move along here and not make this video so long, was what happened was when they put him inside that gym, and people they opened the door, a bunch of people got out, and he got caught up in that, and he got caught up in the stairwell with them, and then got knocked down the stairs and dies at the bottom of the stairwell with the two vials that he had that could have saved everybody crushed. And then this doctor has the nerves. If only we knew what it was like. If only you kept up with him instead. What caused the whole issue again is that stupid voice thing that like you had to verify your voice over the phone in order to talk to somebody, which was ridiculous. So anyway, so we get to the end of it, and this doctor's like, yeah, sooner or later we'll find a human that is immune to it anyway, so whatever. And then of course they bring David in and like, hey, you want to run an immunity check on this one, doctor? And they're like, no, just throw him in there throw him in the gym. Knowing full and well this guy has been going and in close contact with people that had it and still has not shown any symptoms. And they don't even want to run an immunity check. Shit show. That's what this is. A lot like the Video 19 shit show we were put through for the last 3-4 years now. I'll just say that. It's all a shit show. Don't ever in government you don't trust. Let's put it that way. So there we go. And there's never been a Trixie before. So this guy, they let this colonel, they check his blood and everything else, and they decide to let him go on to a different post in Louisiana or something like that. And so all this mess about containing these people, and yet this colonel just gets to leave, and somebody's just going to come in and replace him. So they check his blood over, they check everything. He's good. He gets on a helicopter and leaves, while David, who is also immune, just gets thrown in with a bunch of other crazies and had his fiance killed over nothing. If they had just done a check on him, they would have known he was immune, and this whole issue could have been resolved fairly quickly. But instead, the approach of this whole thing was martial law, take your rights away, we're going to kill you if you don't agree. And I think that's what Romero was trying to portray here. I mean, this was right after, this is coming off the Vietnam War and all the whole thing, and mistrust in government was very high. So you can see how this movie definitely relates to today's times, where again, mistrust in government is very high. Are you surprised? So give us a watch. Definitely a plus George A. Romero movie. And that's my review. You'll see my star rating below, and I'll also leave a critic list on Critic. There's a website called Critic List and an app called Critic List, spelled CRITICLESS. You go to that website, sign up, and then you can put your percentage scores on what you think these movies rank in as. And I'll leave a link to my rank for this movie in the description below, so you can go check that website out at the same time. You can see my percentage score on it. So without further ado, I'll catch you out on an edge of another review. That's Death Row out.